Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about the SIVGA Nightingale. So this is what it looks like up close. This one, of course, is a 14.5 millimeter planar driver. So not a typical planar looking shell, but there is a 14.5 millimeter lurking beneath the stabilized wood faceplate, which looks about like that. So very nice faceplate, nice metal trim around it, and then the back is a shiny kind of piano black looking back of the shell with a attractive brass-ish turbine-looking mesh nozzle. So, little interesting tidbit here. This looks like a QDC connector. It's not quite. I don't think it's quite a QDC. It's kind of a rounded TFC. I'm not sure what they actually called it, but it actually pairs well with their fancy Litz cable. So, quite a nice cable included with this one, but you can kind of see what's going on here. So you can kind of see it's more of a rounded TFZ, maybe not necessarily QDC. I'm not sure. I honestly didn't try a QDC cable on it. I didn't try a TFZ cable on it. I just kind of went with it. So I'm not sure which upgrade cables are actually going to work, but a regular 2-pin will certainly work. So you also get a nice ear tip case and 2 sets of ear tips. So I kind of knocked that one down, but kind of fascinating. So the one on the top here, I think, is more of a final style ear tip. The one on the bottom, I'm not sure if that is a final set or not, or where that one came from. But both tend to be on the small-ish bore style, which was kind of interesting, and I'll kind of talk a little bit about that in a minute. So yeah, kind of nice sets of tips, very nice cable. Nice case. I think all the accessories are kind of right there at $200, kind of what you would expect. So we'll kind of jump right into it. And as I said, so what is it at the top level? It is a 14.5 millimeter planar tune, not quite like a dynamic driver, but the signature is kind of pushed around a little bit in the frequency response into something a little more unique than I was expecting. And we'll take a look at that in a minute. So preference style tunings. Aren't all tunings preferences, right? You get V-shaped, you get neutral. Aren't those all just people's preferences? And I would say yes, but some tend to be a little more general appealing, like V-shapes and Harmons. Those were sort of designed to be very general appealing and work with popular styles of music. And then some tend to be very specialist. Those neutral bright sets, I think, tend to narrow down the focus of who they are targeting. And this one is definitely in that category of a specialist style tuning. So I do have a few nitpicks on this one. If you are going to charge $280 for a planar, it needs to present some positive planar attributes. It needs to be, have a high level of detail, resolution, treble extension. It should show off why people tend to pick up planar drivers and planar sets. Those tend to have a couple attributes that are hard to find at the same price in dynamic drivers. So I would suggest if you're going to charge that much money and put a 14.5 millimeter driver into it, make sure it's kind of obvious that this has an advantage over other $200 or even $100 sets. And if you're going to put out a specialist tuning, like I said, it really needs to be fairly obvious who should buy it. I think neutral brights and I think the V-shapes or even Harmons, I think all of these have certain categories of people who like them. On the specialist side, the neutral brights, the neutrals, the treble head style or even bass head style, I think those kind of tend to be a little bit more obvious. When you start to blend and push around the frequency response, it becomes hard, even as a reviewer, to say, I'm not sure who should really buy this style signature. And lastly, I think justifying the price with the exotic stabilized wood and the Litz cable, I think that becomes a little bit more difficult to do if the sound isn't obvious on who should buy it and having a target market. So sound, I will call it maybe force neutral, force flat, and we'll take a look at what the frequency response looks like here. And you can kind of see just at the top level, it looks kind of flat. I think people who are into flat lines would appreciate this style from this look. And I think the first time I looked at it, I'm like, oh, that's going to be actually a quite nice set. It's got this very nice smooth flat line all the way through treble. And then I think when you look at some of the details of where the levels are, I think it becomes kind of more apparent of what they actually did here and more of what it's going to sound like. So yes, there is a sub bass roll off and there is a slight boost through the mid bass, which gives you kind of nice body. But this subtle arc right here from kind of pinna all the way through presence is very kind of interesting to me from kind of a hobbyist perspective as to what they were going for and who this person is, who this target market is, who likes that style signature. You know, obviously they were going for keeping the treble at a non-fatiguing, non-harsh level, so they arced this down. But you can kind of see, you know, going from Critical's target, which is sort of this neutral style, there's just a really big gap there of where you're expecting these upper mids and treble levels to be and what they delivered and what style of music and listener style that is really aiming for. I think I was kind of scratching my head on that one. So bass, I think in SIVGA's words and their marketing, they call it moderate bass. And like you just saw, I think that actually fits exactly what it is. The mid bass level is good. Like I said, it's just slightly boosted. It gives you enough body and weight. And then rolling down the sub bass offers that tighter impact. So I think that all that was actually done kind of well, and it doesn't overwhelm the mids. If you are super interested in why they tuned the sub bass the way they did, if you actually put some tape over this and you actually get an increase in the bass level, and I didn't graph it, but from a hobbyist perspective of if you actually bump this up just a little bit, the bass becomes overwhelming because this is dipped so low. So I think they actually arced this whole thing down just to match this level, how it's so low. And traditionally, you would bump this up a little bit, and then you would have a bass level that was a little bit above the flat line. And here, if you bump this up just a little bit, it really tanks the whole midsection, and this becomes almost like in a tunnel. It's kind of you get some overwhelming bass over this. There's just not enough here to stand up to any increase here. So the bass looks a little weird, and I sort of figured out by accident what they did and what happens if this isn't at the flat level that they picked it. So kind of get it. I'm not sure I agree with what they did, but that's sort of the way it all worked out. So mids, they call them rich mids, and most of that richness comes from that weight of the lower half. You know, that mid bass boost, I think that actually works out pretty well here. And there's no boost into the upper mid, so you end up with this kind of solid lower foundation. The mids sound thick, almost a little bit too heavy, and they kind of lack a little bit of clarity and transparency. The upper mids are very low pinna, like that's, you know, the pinna gain area. This is, you know, that's probably 2 or 3 dB. It's really, really low. There's no real bump there at all. But the arc down through presence is exactly that. You know, it's very much a lack of presence or a dip in the presence, and it's really missing the upper dynamic range to give the mids more of an in-room experience. It takes on a weird sound because you don't have that presence level of what you're expecting to hear. It doesn't sound like you're in the room. It just sounds like it's being played back through some kind of audio device, and it's not quite the in-room experience. So the lower mids are fine, like I said. You got that nice little bump there. The uppers tend to a little bit missing the clarity and definition that you expect especially at this price point, and especially from a 14mm planar. You know, I think they kind of need to work on that bit of, again, showing some of these planar characteristics really need to shine through on a set of this price point and with a planar driver. So treble, they call it delicate but not harsh. And again, I think they were definitely leaning towards this reduced treble level, no harshness, no fatigue, no brightness. So they brought this level down a lot, and it's quite a bit. It's kind of interesting to hear, but you know, I think delicate was probably the wrong word, as that's sort of what's missing here. I think the treble needed to sound more like the name, more like a nightingale. It really needed to kind of sing just a little bit, extend a little bit further, offer just that top layer of non-harsh dynamics to pull the listener into the experience. And that's sort of what you miss by bringing down the presence so low, is it becomes a little unengaging and a little flatter. And when you clamp down the treble to this not harsh level that they use, it tends to sound over-dampened, like that speaker in the next room type sound. This is the delicate part. Especially with a planar driver, you really need to control the treble so it is not harsh, but you still need to allow it to sound open and airy and extend all the way through so instruments still sound natural. So a very delicate balance on the pull-out off, and they kind of erred on the side of making it not harsh as opposed to making it extend. Stage, again, mostly in your head, but it's really the part where that sub-bass roll-off shines, as it really offers a cleaner, more separated sound with the lower treble level. So you're kind of expecting it to sound a little bit muddier than what it is, but this roll-off actually works here, keeps it just a little cleaner, and there's not a whole lot here to give you a whole lot of separation. So yeah, even rolling it off this little bit actually helped out with everything else on the stage and the separation and the layering. But again, on a planar, these things need to be kind of top-notch, and especially at this price point, those should be way up there, and this one is not quite there. So that is what I got on Nightingale. So thank you guys again for tuning in, and I will see you next time.